On the screen, you're watching an official Chicago police training video on how felony stops must be conducted by the police to shield and protect the police officers as well as the suspects. You'll notice there is a great emphasis on shielding, the police term for the use of their car doors and tires to protect themselves by getting down between the door and the car. On these felony stops, you can see all of the police commands to the suspects are issued from behind their doors, basically their shields. The proper protocol is all suspects are ordered out of the car, away from the vehicle, and ordered down on the ground with their hands held high in the air until they are handcuffed and secured. This is the correct way the Chicago police officers are instructed to apprehend suspects in a car at a felony stop. But it was not the way Chicago police officers stopped Robert Russ, a popular Northwestern University graduating senior, on the evening of June 5th, 1999, which resulted in his unnecessary and tragic death. In this insider exclusive special, When Cops Go Wrong, Deadly Felony Stops, we show how Don Shapiro, founder and partner at the law firm of Don Shapiro Limited, got justice for Robert's family with a record-breaking verdict of $12 million. You will see how Don proved this case by proving the lies and the contradictions of the various Chicago police officers, by assembling an array of highly qualified expert witnesses, including world-renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden and Dr. James Fife, former NYPD cop and head of the NYPD Police Academy. He also uncovered an independent witness who had routinely been dismissed by the internal Chicago police investigation, but who turned out to be extremely credible. Don Shapiro has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best people's trial lawyers in Illinois and in the nation. He has seen many innocent and hardworking people become victims of police brutality. He understands that police brutality is one of the most serious, enduring, and divisive human rights violations in the United States. The problem is not just in Chicago, but nationwide, and its nature is institutionalized. Police officers engage in unjustified shootings, severe beatings, and fatal chokings in cities across America, while their police supervisors, city officials, and the Justice Department fail to act decisively to restrain or penalize such acts, or even to record the full magnitude of the problem. Don understands that victims seeking redress face daunting obstacles at every point in the process, ranging from overt intimidation to the reluctance of local and federal prosecutors to take on brutality cases. Don also understands that because of that, he is driven to fight for the people who have been harmed by the willful and negligent actions of others. He learned a long time ago that if a man hasn't discovered something he will die for, he isn't fit to live. His goals, not only to get justice for his clients, but to make sure all Americans have the right to a fair trial, honest cops, impartial prosecutors, and fair judges with no agendas. Because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, and justice and power must be brought together so that whatever is just may be powerful, and whatever is powerful may be just. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from Chicago, Illinois, at the law firm of Donald Shapiro Limited. It is my great privilege and pleasure to introduce Don Shapiro to the show. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the type of law that you practice. What kind of lawyer do you see yourself as?
I represent victims, people who have been the victim of truck accidents, people who have gone into hospitals and had catastrophic injuries received in the hospital, people that have been shot and killed on the street. All sorts of people who are basically all victims.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, and I want to point this out for our viewers, most of these people could never afford a lawyer to fight for them in court, right?
Oh, that's absolutely true.
So what a lot of people don't know is lawyers like yourself, real live trial lawyers, take on a case after you've evaluated it, and you have to invest not only a lot of your time, but a lot of money that if you lose, you don't recoup that, do you?
No, you don't get a cent. So you've got to approach every case. You want to do a great job. You want to achieve justice.
Right.
And the contingent fee system is what allows people who don't have the means to fight these corporations to get to court.
Right. Today we're going to talk about the Robert Russ case, Bobby Russ. And before you talk a little bit about what happened, we have a couple of news clips that actually took place when he was murdered by the police. So we're going to show them right now.
23-year-old Robert Russ was shot following a struggle that began with a traffic stop at 29th and the Dan Ryan Expressway. Police say officers began to follow Russ after they noticed him driving erratically at Balboa and Lakeshore Drive early Saturday morning. Investigators say the former Northwestern football player, who was to graduate in 2 weeks, bumped several squad cars during the chase. He was shot at 29th and the Dan Ryan after an officer's pistol discharged when police say Russ grabbed the weapon. But questions about the shooting persist because police broke the back window of Russ's car after he stopped, and police say he was unarmed and not intoxicated.
Tell us a little bit about what happened in this case.
Bobby Russ was driving home from Northwestern University campus where he was about to graduate in a few days. He's going back to his family home in the south suburbs of Chicago. He apparently had made an improper lane change. That's what the police claimed. And the police tried to flag him over. We found out later he didn't have his identification with him, so we think what happened is because of that he refused to stop and traveled about 2 miles, not on a high-speed chase, just refusing to pull over. That's what the police said. They eventually came, boxed him in. One of the police officers was so angry that Russ had not stopped when he had flashed his lights that he got out of his car, totally violating police procedure for a stop, came up to the car, kicked the car door, started screaming and swearing at Russ, then took a tire iron, smashed in the back window of the car, had his gun pointed, and then when Russ turned to surrender, the police officer shot him and killed him. And that's essentially what happened in a nutshell.
Now, a lot of what you just said violates the Chicago Police Department's policy in stopping a person in a felony stop.
Right, and we had police regulations and procedures blown up in the courtroom. We had a police procedures expert explain this. They violated several of their own policies and procedures.
What were they?
In this case? Well, for example, the particular officer shouldn't have even been involved because only 2 officers are supposed to be involved in a chase, and it had been clearly reported on the radio that 2 other officers were involved. Second of all, and the most important thing, was when a police officer stops somebody like this type of a situation, even if it's a felony, they are supposed to stand behind their car. They're supposed to open the car door, and we had a police training video that demonstrated exactly this point.
Right.
They're never supposed to approach the vehicle. They're supposed to order the person out of the car, put your keys on top of the hood, come out, hands behind your head, and everybody goes home safely. The cop goes home safely, and the person being arrested goes home safely. In this case, they didn't follow those police procedures. The cop escalated the situation. So Bobby Russ wound up dead, and the police officer was liable.
Now, in this kind of a case, when it was brought to you or you found out about it, what made you to decide to take this case?
Well, at first I was skeptical because if you took at face value the police report,
Which was a lie.
which was turned out to contain many lies, but if you looked at it at face value, it looked like Russ was a bad guy who had attacked the police officer,
Right.
but things didn't add up.
Right.
And we looked at it, and then we sent it to a couple experts to take a look at it. One Dr. Michael Baden, who is a well-known forensic pathologist, took a look at it and said the forensic facts didn't add up.
Right. And let's talk about those
Sure.
forensic facts. The police claimed that he didn't turn his body. He put his hands over his shoulder, reached through the back window that had been knocked out by the cop, right?
Correct.
And grabbed the cop and the gun and was fighting with him and pulling it in, right?
Right.
Which was, since there were no cuts on his arm, which was a total lie.
Right. The cuts was a big factor, because how could you be struggling over jagged glass
Yeah.
and not have any cuts on you?
Yeah.
But even more important than that, their version, he was grabbing the gun, okay? He was shot in the hand first. The hand, then the chest, okay? So Dr. Baden's key conclusion was that this was not a contact wound to the hand, but the gun was a few inches away from his hand.
Protecting his face.
Protecting him, surrendering like this.
Yes. Let's talk about your strategy in preparing for this case. What were the points you were going to prove?
Well, key things were the violation of the police procedure, the forensic evidence, and then catching the police officer in all sorts of lies. He had talked about the stop and the struggle. Turned out that we found an eyewitness who was buried in the police report and who was no longer living in the Chicago area. He was in the military. Mm-hmm. And I went down to San Antonio, Texas to interview him. Turns out this young man, who was a senior in high school at the time, 17 years old, had been driving behind Russ and noticed his license plate that said Great 98 and saw that the police were trying to pull him over. And then about 2 miles later, he happened to have taken the same cutoff, and he came across the 3 police cars, the Great 98 car. Right. So he pulled over to the side of the road. And Jesse Hansford positioned himself so he could see what was going on. And he absolutely contradicted the police officer, said there was never a struggle.
Yes.
He said that Russ turned his hands around as if surrendering, and the next thing there was a shot. Whether it was the sudden movement of Russ that spooked the police officer, who was kind of hyped up. Remember, he'd been kicking the car door and smashing in the window. Right. We think that's what happened.
Right. There was an internal affairs cop there too, who also said he didn't see a struggle. Is that right?
That's right. Now, he didn't work for the Chicago Police Department, though. He worked for the Cook County Sheriff's Office, which is a separate institution. Mm-hmm. And so he was not as tied in with the code of silence as the Chicago police officers. He was positioned right in front of the front passenger door, so he should have been able to see if there was a struggle, and he said didn't see a struggle.
Now, one of the great moments in this case was the fact that when the prosecutors brought in a vehicle, half of a vehicle, to demonstrate how Bobby Russ actually did what they said he did. What happened in this?
Well, that was an incredible moment in the trial. They put a police officer in the vehicle that was approximately Russ's size.
Big guy.
Big guy. Russ had been a football player. So they had the officer reach out just to show that somebody could get their hands out through the back window of this replica vehicle. Problem was, he just barely got one of his hands outside the window, let alone what the police were saying, that Russ, without even turning his torso, got both arms out the window and grabbed a police officer. And as soon as the jury said that, we spoke to the jurors after the trial, they said as soon as they saw that demonstration, whatever remote doubts they had left were vanished.
Yeah, and not only that, but if a policeman who has a gun, he's outside the car, he sees someone coming at him, he's going to back up.
1 second. an incident, he could back up.
Talk about the verdict. How long was the jury out? What kind of verdict did you get?
The jury was out quite a long time. I think it was 2 or 3 days. But for most of that time, they told us afterwards, they were arguing about the money.
Really?
Yeah.
In other words, what was the range? How did they determine the money? Because you got a $12 million verdict.
Right.
How did they come up with that number?
Well, according to our interviews with the jury, and we always do that afterwards, one of the jurors wanted to give $69 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
And where did he get that number?
I don't know.
Yeah.
These people on the jury who were just average citizens like everybody else, they were angry at the police department for what they did. Not only for what they did, but then coming into court and lying about the whole situation. They were upset that the city, instead of settling this case, was taking this case to trial instead of using those funds. There were several teachers on the jury. And they said, why weren't they using those funds for education? We don't have enough books in our classroom.
Now, the city did offer to settle it for, what, $8 million?
They did.
Yeah.
And apparently this went to the highest rank of city government, which is probably our ex-mayor.
You're talking about Mayor Daley.
I am.
Right.
Yes.
And what happened when he got it?
He put the kibosh on the deal.
Yeah.
The city's attorneys wanted to settle the case. And he wouldn't do it. His attitude was, hey, if a jury tells us we have to pay the money, then we'll pay it. Well, wound up costing the city a lot of money.
Let's talk about police brutality and some of the issues. You hear a lot about it. You see it all around the country. And I want to say for our audience that, you know, thank God we have police. 99% of them are good cops. There are some bad apples, and those bad apples cause a lot of problems and cause a lot of injury and harm. What is, in police brutality cases, how do you figure race is a factor?
Well, sometimes race is unquestionably a factor. In this case, however, it was an African-American cop, African-American victim. So I don't think race really played a role in this case. I think it has to do more in today's society with the psychological makeup of those bad apple police officers. I agree with you. Most police officers are good people. We need more like that. But there's always those guys who get into police work because they want to be the king of the jungle, and they want to exert their power, their authority, and sometimes they don't recognize boundaries.
When when individuals feel they've been violated by the police, talk about filing complaints. Is that difficult to do?
Well, anybody can file a complaint. Filing a lawsuit and winning a lawsuit is very difficult.
Yeah. And for that reason, you don't take a lot of civil rights cases unless the factors are there that really call out and cry out for justice, right?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
When we get many calls on police cases, we investigate them carefully, and we only really pursue the case if we feel strongly that the person has been victimized.
What do you see as a result of this case and other cases against the Chicago Police Department? Do you see that the Chicago Police Department is implementing new policies to kind of weed out problem officers?
Well, you know, the policies and procedures are designed to prevent incidents like this. For example, when I talked earlier about getting out of the police vehicle and not approaching, that is designed to not escalate the situation. And if they follow those procedures, they're going to have less problems. But there's still always those aberrant situations where the police officers don't follow their own policies and procedures.
When you have a case, not only this case, but any kind of case, talk about settlements versus going to trial. When do you you have to notify your client, obviously. This is what someone's proposed. But how do you make a decision as to whether you should pursue a trial versus taking a settlement?
Well, there are so many factors that go into that, but you basically calculate what are our probabilities of winning the case. If we win the case, what's the probable range of verdicts? And is a bird in the hand worth two in the bush?
Yes.
Are they offering enough that it's a fair settlement, a good settlement? Usually the cases that go to trial are cases where the defendant has failed to properly evaluate the case. They're either making no offer at all or giving you a real lowball offer.
They're being stupid.
They are.
Yeah.
They are, and time again we have to go to court and prove them wrong.
Yeah. Do you see that as a result of this case and other cases like that, you see changes for the positive happening to protect citizens?
I really can't say I see a lot of positive changes taking place. I think the police department still has their policies and procedures. It's a question of how strongly they're going to implement and be honest with the public about what is happening.
Yeah.
And we have a new administration now in Chicago.
Right.
We have a new police superintendent. We'll see how things go.
Well, I certainly, and our audience certainly thanks you for being with us on this program today. The case was a remarkable case, and you won a great verdict. And I think America owes you a lot of gratitude for taking the chance and winning the case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.